What's going on, everyone? It's going to be Summary of Markets Week 46. We're going to start with the Summary of Markets, then move on to the options watch list, as always. Starting off with SPY, we did see that we had stimulus news being passed this weekend. They do think they're going to have a relief bill passed by the end of today. So when the futures open at 6 o'clock, they should be pricing in that news. So look for around like 3,720 on ES, which would be like 372 on SPY. I think you will get at least a 1 to 3 point gap on SPY, even if it is priced in. So watch for that. And then if you do start to break above 372, I'd watch for about 375. You are still holding this little uptrend here. You tried to break through it, found support on that ascending triangle, and then we kind of popped up and we're still holding that high. The only downside that I have on SPY is you are losing momentum as you are climbing, because each one of these pushes higher is getting weaker and weaker. The trend is still very bullish on the Momo. You're still green on the OTS, so you're still getting buy volume. You're still above the trail, so everything is still bullish. You are just losing momentum, okay? So we'll see how much momentum comes in if they do get that bill passed today. If there is a lot of momentum, you could easily see 375, maybe even like 378 on the high end. But my local target would be that 372 target, so around 3720 on ES. So keep an eye on that. I think you're still very bullish on SPY until you get back below like 365. So any dips above that are buyable. All right, moving on to gold. You're still in this massive downtrend, but because that stimulus news is coming out, that should be the thing that sends gold up. So watch for gold to push higher. If it does break out of this channel and gets above this 1920, you have a little bit of resistance right around that pivot 1950. But once you kind of reclaim this little area right here as support, you should definitely start into another uptrend back into the 2000 range, 2100 range, okay? So keep an eye on how it reacts to stimulus. If the stimulus is passed and it is a strong reaction from gold, basically any dips above like 1900 would be buyable, okay? So keep an eye on that. You want to see it break the channel with some strength. All right, moving on to oil. We thought that there was going to be a little pullback or a consolidation from this bear div, but there was some OPEC news that led to a bigger demand or lower supply. Both kind of played a part in this, but the price is just ripping higher, basically. One thing I didn't talk about that I missed last week was the Momo is completely flat at 15. When that trend line does that, it means your trend is very strong. So typically when that happens, these divs are not going to play out. So that is something that I missed last week. And now moving forward, as long as that trend line is flat, those divs are not going to play out as strongly as they typically would. Now let's go ahead. Let's delete all these old levels. Let's actually look at, let me take some fib levels first, and let's see if there's any pivots above us that we can take. So moving forward, you want to look for like 52.60 and then 54 that lines up right with that pivot as well. So that would be your breakout target if this does continue. And then obviously if this pulls back to around 46 or even 45, that should be a bullish pullback. Now zooming out, let's see, are there any other pivots in that area? We have a pivot that we just broke, 48.75. We have another one around 54, and then we have one around 72. So those are your main levels you want to keep an eye on. All right, moving on to Bitcoin. I told you guys that it was putting in a bulldog here. It looked like it wanted to break into all-time high. 20,360 was your target. I also gave you guys some bulldog targets if you wanted to look for a further breakout. And I'm going to show you exactly where those targets are. Why is it not letting me do this? Here we go. So your breakout targets were 21,800 and then 22,300. And now our secondary breakout targets or 23,007 and then 24,002. So you blew through your first breakout targets, and now your second breakout targets are giving you a little bit of resistance. If you do break out again, if you hold above that 24,002, watch 26,001 as your final target. Once that final target is hit, we will adjust our fibs again. So moving forward, this would be support, this would be support, and then this would be your upper target, okay? Moving on to Ethereum, basically the same thing that we talked about on that. The bulldog breaking out, played out beautifully. You had 637 and 658 as your targets, and you can see both of those targets were hit. So a breakout target now, if we do hold this as support, would be 716, 735. This would be your local support. If you do pull back, watch for that pivot around 609 to be your lower support. Okay. That is the summary of markets. Pretty short. Let's go to the options watch list. All right, so a couple things that we're watching this week. Let me click through these, find the best charts. Ladder, I am looking for a small breakout on this thing, so you could grab this big bull flag that we're in as your level. Your target on that would be 1027, breakout target 1140, 1178. Keep an eye on that. As long as you stay above $10, you should be breaking out higher. Moving on to Overstock, exactly what we talked about last week played out. You had that support coming in, it tapped that support beautifully, and then bounced. Now you're putting in a textbook bulldog. So you have that bottom, curved back, bottom, pop, pullback. As long as you hold that pullback, let me give you some targets. Your targets would be 71.60, 74, which lines up with that anchored VWAP at 75. You break that anchored VWAP, watch for 83.86. You do have to hold above, I'd say, like $60 for this to look like it wants to go higher. Okay, so keep an eye on that. Peloton blew through all the targets I gave you guys. I gave you guys a target of 122, 132, and then 140. 140 was hit, so let's look at some higher targets here moving forward. I don't really have any consolidation that I can grab any higher targets off of. But let's take this little level here. So we just hit those breakout levels there. Secondary breakout would be 149, 153. Final target being 167. Keep an eye on this. This looks really good. Any pullback should be very bullish. Snapchat, you failed our 54 target beautifully. So if you guys took profit there, you basically took profit on the top. Next target is 60. That is actually our final target for this impulse. So as long as this impulse continues, you stay above $50 on the pullback, you should be seeing $60 on the move up. Big C, watch Big C here. Same exact play as the Overstock play. So you have a little bit of accumulation down here. Watch for that double bottom to come in. You have that bulldog forming. So if you put in that double bottom around here, you could see a pop up, pull back, and then a breakout higher into that 100 target that I gave you guys earlier. So keep an eye on that support. As long as that holds, it should be pretty bullish. Moving on to PLTR, I still don't like PLTR too much. You did break that bullish pennant bearishly. You're kind of just consolidating through it. But you can see here your trend line, you lost that 15. So you lost that really strong uptrend. Massive decrease in momentum on the short-term price action. So you are pushing lower. Unless this Momo starts to flip bullish, I would not be too bullish on PLTR. Anything below 26 is very ugly. I think it will go down to 24, maybe even 22 if you don't reclaim 26 very soon. Moving on to AMD, 98 target was hit beautifully, almost called the top to the tick. I think it missed it by 2 pennies. If you do get above 98, watch 103, 105. You are still holding this massive uptrend, so as long as that impulse holds, you will look for your final target all the way from 103 to 112. But keep an eye on that impulse. For right now, the trend is pretty strong. All right, moving on to NEO. I gave you guys a little falling wedge there. I said if it broke out, you're looking for $50. You are still pushing up in that $50 range. I did say there would be a little bit of resistance around this 47 to 48 because of that little structure we have there, a little resistance. But if we do break that, 50 should be very easy, and then 53 would be the upper target. Moving on to Chegg, I gave you guys a target of 87 as long as you stayed above 77. Your target was hit. Now it looks like it wants to form a little bit of a cup and handle maybe consolidate a little bit. I'd say anything, let me see, let's take this impulse. I'd say anything above like 84, 82 would be really good. And then watch for 92, 100, 103 as your breakout targets. All right, moving on to Teladoc. You're kind of putting in a bulldog here, but it didn't really give you that double bottom. So you're kind of putting in like a higher leg bulldog. These aren't as strong, but watch for that 206 target above 200. You should be able to get it. If you hold above 206, watch 220. Starbucks has been playing out beautifully to our analysis. As long as this impulse continues, you want to see 106, 108. You hit our 104, 105 targets. So any pullback above like 101, 100, you should get that 106, 108. So keep an eye on that. LW still following our trade plan. Watch 83 is the final target. Little bit of resistance around $80. Lumber liquidators was something somebody asked about in Discord. I said it looked really good. Where's that chart? Yeah, ascending triangle. Beautiful breakout. Let me grab some levels for you. So we broke the fake out level at 32. That would have been your initial target. And now as long as the impulse continues, 35 to 37 would be your upper targets. Moving on to Zillow. This is one that played out beautifully in Discord. We called this out when it was putting in this triangle. I told you guys as soon as it broke, you were looking for 122 to 132. Those targets were hit easily. 135 was the next target. That was hit. Next target is 145, 148. As long as 132 holds its support, you should be getting these next targets. So keep an eye on that. Moving on to Target, I told you guys if Target pulled back to 170, as long as you hold 170, you should be getting 179, 182. So keep an eye on Target. If this starts to shift momentum, which it already is trying to do, this will look really good for next week. You can see this massive 4-hour bull div coming in. You're really not pushing down on any high volume. So as long as you start to curl here and that momentum follows, you should easily be getting 179, 182. Invalidation for this would be below 167. All right, moving on to Square. I told you guys that as long as you stayed above 215, you were going to get 225, 227. Your secondary targets were 235, 237. All of those targets were hit. So as long as you stay above 237, you're going to hit your final target at 247, and then I'll give you guys an additional fib after that. Jeffries, we are still waiting on Jeffries to break 24. You have a massive ascending triangle, which is being held down by some resistance levels. But as soon as we break 24, that would be a big play. So keep an eye on that. DraftKings, I told you guys above 53, you should get 57. You topped out a little early, but you're still holding 53. So as long as 53 holds, 57 should be hit. Final target would be 64. Moving on to Penn, I told you guys above 77, you should be getting 89 to 92. Both of those targets were hit. If you stay above 89, you should be getting 101, 104 as long as this impulse continues. So keep an eye on that. Anything above 89 should break out higher. Moving on to AI, I think I had a short-term chart on this. Where is it? Yeah, so you guys were asking me about levels on AI. I gave you guys a bunch of pivots to watch. These were the resistance levels that would act as targets. All of those targets were easily broken, and now we are pushing higher. So if I was looking at a breakout play here on AI, you would take the low of this impulse to the high of the impulse, and then if you get above, let's say 141, let me push this out. Let's say 142, you should get 150, 153. So keep an eye on AI there. Walmart, I told you guys it looked like a massive falling wedge, which it was. You had a 4-hour falling wedge here, tried to break out, gave you a little bit of a retest. As long as you stay above, I'd say like 145, you should be getting 148, 149. Okay, so keep an eye on this shift in momentum. If the OTS turns white and then the Momo flips bullish, you should be breaking out into that higher level. Tractor Supply, we had a trade on this. I took profit. It was like $1 away from my target and started to top out a little bit, so we took profit on it. It looks like the impulse wants to continue, so you should get your target, which is a gap fill around 149. So watch out for that. If you do start to top out a little bit, I'd say you would be invalidated below Friday's low, which is like 145. I also took profit on the eBay. I did not like how we were pulling back into that range. We did get faked out a little bit, but this was a really nice profit, seeing that it was my second largest position. But if you do want to hold eBay, the target remains to be 56, as long as you stay above 53. FSLY, we took a trade on this. Beautiful trade. We made over $200 a contract on this in a little under, like, I think it was like an hour and a half market time. We bought it on close on Friday. We sold it on open on Monday, I think, or something like that. No, it was Thursday to Friday, I believe. We bought it on close on Friday, or excuse me, Thursday, sold it on Friday. So really easy trade there. He broke out of an ascending triangle on the 4-hour, and then I was looking for 109, but I had a little soft target around 106. So as soon as it started to hit 106, we closed it. We damn near closed the high of the day. So really good trade. I think this trade is still viable for next week as long as the momentum continues to climb. If you can hold above 103, I think you get 109, 110. And then if you hold above 110, easily get the gap fill at 120 to 123. So keep an eye on that. Honeywell, as long as you hold 210, this trade is still viable. I think you'll get 220, 230. You are rolling over a little bit, putting in that bear div. So we might have to stop out on this trade pretty soon, but keep an eye on that. Moving on to Rocket. Rocket had a beautiful breakout, but you did fail that level that I gave you guys around 2260, and you put another top doji on that pivot. As long as we hold the daily pivot here at 22, we should get above 23, but they did get downgraded by, I think it was JP Morgan. Somebody downgraded them, which led to that sell-off. We do have to get above 23 pretty soon, or it's going to start to sell off. Moving on to Verizon. I like Verizon long-term still. I did add on to my shares a little bit. I like this little curl in momentum. I like the buy pressure that came in on Friday. If we get back above 61.5, we should easily get towards that mid 65 target in a couple of weeks. So keep an eye on that. RTX, you're also selling off just like Honeywell is. It is putting a little bit of a wedge in here. If you look at this level like this, so we could start to bounce a little bit and kind of put in that wedge. If we break out of that wedge bullishly, we should easily be seeing 76 to 78. So keep an eye on that wedge on the 4-hour. Moving on to Siri. I do like Siri. You did have a nasty day on Friday. Why did I like this? I think it was the daily trail. Yeah, we have a daily trail bounce here. It kind of rejected on Friday, so we might have to stop out on this trade. But I do have room to add. So if this pulls back to like $6, I'm going to add on to my shares, and then we'll look for a reversal to around $7 on that. But I don't like Friday's candle, a little nasty, so we probably will get that lower failure where we will add on to our shares. NLS, I actually closed this. It had a bounce up on Friday. You hit the trail, which was my soft target. I was looking for $20, but it started to top out a little early, so we took profit on that. We made 40% on our options, which is very good. So we closed that trade. Let me actually take that out of the current holdings. Finally, we had Intel. Intel started selling off on news that I think it was Microsoft. They said they were going to start making their own chips. So big competitor entering the space. So they started to sell off pretty hard. If you do find support on Intel around like 46, you should be able to bounce back into like that $50 range. So keep an eye on that lower accumulation. As long as those lower pivots and auto SRs are not lost, it should find a little bit of support. All right, moving on to CVS. We have a couple of leap plays here on CVS. As long as it holds this like daily trail here, I wanted to get back above 70 as soon as possible. I think you will easily see 75 to 80 within a month or so. I do have $90 calls, which were like a lotto play on January if we did continue to rip higher because we were breaking that monthly anchored VWAP. If you take an anchored VWAP from the all-time high, we were breaking through that. But it ended up rejecting that level. So I want to see a break of that anchored VWAP, and then long-term, $90 would be the target. So keep an eye on that. Johnson & Johnson is another leap that we're looking at. The monthly is breaking out of a massive resistance. You have a beautiful monthly candle forming on December. It looks like it wants to break into all-time high. I think you will see 160 to 170 within a few months on Johnson & Johnson. So keep an eye on that for long-term. Another long-term play that we've been in for a little while is Cloud. This thing is absolutely paying us. We took some, I think $30 leaps is what we have, and we're already at 28. So these leaps are paying pretty big. As long as you stay above 27, you should be getting that $30 target, and then even 31 to 32 could come pretty soon. This breakout on the weekly and the monthly is very, very bullish. You are putting in a monthly pivot candle, so that is something to watch out for. I am going to add to this position on any dips because we're already in profit, I think like 50 to 60%. Smile Direct is another leap play that I just started building into. I do like this play for long term. We do have a massive inverse head and shoulders getting ready to break out on the weekly. You have a couple of targets here you could look for, 24 to 26. That would be an all-time high on Smile Direct. I do like that we're putting in a little kind of a cup and handle as well as that inverse head and shoulders. Now, obviously, this would not be a textbook cup and handle, but what I do like is you are putting in an uptrend here and you're kind of putting in that curved bottom, showing that the buyers want to push this higher. So if you do start to break above like $13, this thing should easily rip into $20 long term. The only downside is the loss in momentum here. Now, the reason this is not too big of a worry is you're not making massive new highs on that bear div. It's kind of more of a consolidation that is giving you that bear div. So that's not too much of a worry, but I do want to see some strong momentum when we do finally break that inverse head and shoulders. So keep an eye on that long term. This would be a like a 6 month to a 1 year out play. So nothing too short term. All right, moving on to Microsoft. You hit our target on Microsoft, or our first target was around 220, 222. So that first target was hit. You did pull back to 217, but as long as 217 holds, I think you easily get to that 222 target, and then 226 would be the breakout target. So keep an eye on Microsoft. That doji on Friday is putting in a bulldog. So you have that double bottom, pop up, and then a pullback. Textbook bulldog. So as long as you stay above 217, this should easily rip higher. Moving on to Apple, you are pulling back on Apple, putting in a little bit of a bear div. Short term, there's no div, but long term, there is. But Apple still looks really good above 125. As long as you hold 125, I think you go for that gap fill around 130, 132. Okay, keep an eye on that. Facebook moving forward, you had a couple of fake outs here last week below this trend line. But if you get above 277, you should easily get 285. And then if you break this long-term triangle, you should easily break into 300, 310 as your breakout targets. But short-term, hold above 277, watch that 285. The buy pressure is very strong. We tried to dip 2 times last week, and both of which were bought up very quickly. So I think Facebook wants to go higher. Moving on to Netflix, I told you guys above 525, you should get 542. You are still continuing that impulse, so that play is still active. As long as 525 holds, watch 542, and then 550 would be the upper target. Moving on to Amazon, this play is still in effect. I told you guys if you broke this triangle, anything above 3,200, you want to see 33 to 34. Now you are pulling back, but once again, look at this play. Double bottom, pop up, pullback, still putting in that bulldog. Anything above 32 should get 33 and 34. Okay? Stop loss and invalidation on that play would be 3,100. Tesla, as I told you guys time and time again, as long as you stayed above 620, 633, your final target at 679 was going to be hit. That ended up being the top almost perfectly before we failed downward and then ripped higher. But if we do look at the daily, this thing went absolutely ballistic on the after hours session, pushing all the way up to 695. So big day on that. As you can see, that candle is really disgusting. One of the highest volume days Tesla has ever had. So big day. That was because they are being added to the S&P 500. So we'll have to see how that plays out next week. Now that that final target has been taken, I can finally delete this fib and we can look for a new fib. So we're going to take the low of the impulse from back here. Actually, I'm going to make a more short-term one. So I'll quickly show this long-term one for you guys who like to hold Tesla long-term, but I'm going to make the short-term one for the guys in Discord. So long-term, you hold above 683, 766, 792, 878, 907. Final target being 1017. Okay, that would be the very long-term fib. Let me actually go ahead. We're going to delete this. We're going to make this a shorter fib. So we're going to take the most recent impulse, which was off of this little doji here, and then we're going to grab that high, which caused that breakout. So now that we have this impulse, this will be our fib moving forward. As long as you stay above 654, 669, your targets will be 711 and then 725. you stay above those levels, 769, 783. Final target being around 840. Okay, so that is going to be our fib moving forward. But that is it, guys. That is the options watch list and the summary markets. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, please make sure to hit that like button, and I will see you guys tomorrow for our live trading session in Discord. You guys have a good rest of your weekend. Peace out.